Welcome to Ali Fitness Podcast, a weekly production all about bringing health into fitness. Bryan O'Rourke's expertise are by no means limited to the fitness industry and in fact range from technology development and strategic planning to innovation and digital transformation. His experience includes orchestrating acquisitions and strategic partnerships in areas of fitness, health clubs, franchising, wellness, software, supply chain, technology, services, and food beverage. In fact, I think that's pretty much everything anyway. So when he's not doing keynote speaking or writing for articles and books or hosting his fitness and technology podcast, which I highly recommend, Bryan is running his Vedere Venture company, which invests in fitness, betterment, and wellbeing technology companies. And if you want to know anything about technology or fitness, then Bryan is your man. Bryan, it's an honor to have you on today.
Ali, I appreciate the opportunity. How are things going in Manhattan? Is it nice and pleasant weather up there in New York today?
It's not yet winter, so it's nice.
That's great. Thank you for having me.
Don't ask me in a month's time, though. So, look, I've been wanting to get you on the show because I listen to you sometimes and you talk about technologies that I have never even heard of. And I feel like I'm fairly up to date with, what's out there in the fitness industry especially, but clearly not. So I want to delve deep and ask you all about that. But even before we do, can you give us a bit of your background and how you got into fitness and then technology and how they've sort of merged together for you effectively?
Yeah, sure. So I actually started, my background originally is in finance. And I worked starting at a young age for an entrepreneur in the New Orleans area, a guy by the name of Alvin Copeland, who was the founder of, ironically, a fried chicken brand called Popeye's Fried Chicken. And he was a very well-known entrepreneur. And we did acquisitions and had a bunch of ancillary businesses. And at that time, this is in the 80s, the personal computer came out in the early 80s. And as a young man getting out in finance, I learned to use spreadsheets and tools like that. And so quickly in that industry, this is before the internet, I was an early adopter of tech applications. And so in my career, I've been doing that, for a number of years. When I came across the fitness space, which happened when we were involved with the Smoothie King franchise, putting locations in 24-hour fitnesses, and that's in the mid-90s. I started doing work with a number of well-known health club operators, and my partner and wife, Maureen, did work with health clubs from about 1997, and then it went from there. We got into the group fitness business. We started doing a lot of different work in the space, and so it's been about a 20-something year run in the industry. But all the while in my career, we've been early adopters. So when we got into the fitness space, things like adopting cloud computing, people didn't know what the cloud was. We did all these things that were just early things, and they really touched on every one of the companies that we've been growing, developing, and working with for the last 20 something years.
Wow. And do you remember the first thing that you sort of felt like this is real technology for fitness?
Well, that's not, I kind of, that's a big question, Ali. I look at tech in a little different lens. There's so many cool things that are technology related, but as you know, it really comes down to how do you apply it and what difference does it make to the human being? So, while I'm a big optimist when I see cool technologies, I'm almost also a pragmatist. So I don't, I tend to, there's so many of those things. I'd hate to bore you with the long list. But when I do see those things, I'm more interested in thinking through their complete implications. Some technologies are cool and they have awful consequences. And some technologies are not as cool and they have profound implications. A great example of that, which might seem a little cavalier to you and your listeners, is the answer to the question of this. What was the greatest impact to the fitness industry from a technology perspective in the last 50, 60 years? And my thesis is it was the birth control pill. Because what that led to is women entering the workforce. It led to the dual household breadwinner scenario. It led to rising levels of household consumption of the modern day health club industry emerge in the early 80s. And those were all tied to that mega trend impact. So it may seem a little strange, but that I think illustrates the point of sometimes there are profound implications we don't see from technologies that are actually more profound than the ones we might think originally would have a bigger impact.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great example. So why do you say, and I've heard you say this before, that it's the greatest time to be in the fitness industry?
Oh, wow, that's a great question. Well, because number one, you can do it. Today's world, professionals, business people, users, people looking to experience wellness, fitness, betterment, nutrition, whatever you want to call it. There's so many ways to create products and solutions to go to market that are highly specialized with digital and all the different manners of creating, delivering service or product to market now. And so that's on the supply side and the entrepreneurial side. And on the demand side, there's just all these mega trends that are leading to an explosion of demand. Everything from, boomers having to take much better care of themselves to fitness seen now as a lifestyle, kind of a lifestyle dynamic, wellness, betterment, self-care. Those things are really, they're very desired by a large swath of people, and particularly the millennials. Just changes in awareness of the world around us, human beings looking to, consider their health and their enjoyment of life in general. So you have these two aspects of supply and demand that I think are growing the market tremendously. And all the statistics that you know of point to that happening, and I think it's going to continue to happen.
And so if this all sort of continues along this trend, where do you think the, traditional style of training will go? For example, personal training.
So, there are a lot of industries I think we can learn from that point the way. And so, again, if you look at the marketplace through the lens of providing a product and service, and through the lens of needing a product or service, when you look at the space, I think that traditional, or, if you use that term, so to speak, it will never go away. But if you compare it to things like retail shopping, you compare it to things even like the restaurant industry, which my background's in, or the music industry, okay? I think that there will be the physical delivery of trainers to individuals and intense human interaction. And I also think there are going to be digital avatar services that are intelligent and non-human that will be able to deliver, experience and training, support and service wherever and whenever you are. I don't think those things necessarily are opposed to each other. I think some of those will be an extension of the physical experience in club. I think others will be pure digital, and I think there will be hybrids. When you look at retail shopping right now, you see that. You can purchase service or product online. You can return it to store. It's really whenever and wherever the consumer seeks to want it and need it at the time. So depending on the journey, I don't see those experiences going away, but I do see them as a smaller part of a larger industry space. Wherein today, and they're all, as I've written about recently, the future will largely be influenced by what I term hybrid models, many of which have not been invented yet. But for example, if you look at restoration hardware, and they have a few, one in particular in Manhattan that's fascinating. In the furniture industry, restoration hardware, they have a beautiful retail online store you can buy and purchase furniture from, or you can go into one of their galleries, their $100 million developments with full-blown restaurants and beautiful landscapes and just gorgeous spaces where you can consult with an interior design or landscape professional. You can sit on the furnishing. You can experience a living lifestyle in the location, and this just builds brand, and it just complements experience both from the digital to the physical side. As I've cited in the past, the people in the people in the music industry in the 90s were bemoaning the digital age of music and how it would destroy, the music industry, traditional music. And all it did was it destroyed the pigs at the trough in the music industry. The truth is that live concerts and performances and the sales of music has tripled in the first decade of the 21st century. So I think you will see similar things happening in our industry overall. And I think there's going to be a very strong place for competitors in bricks and mortar. They're just going to have to, in the fitness space, do a really good job of understanding how they're going to compete and how their delivery of experience and fitness experience fits in that new digital physical world.
Yeah, that's a really good explanation. And Bryan, do you know anyone that's doing that really well now and how they're doing that?
Well, of course, McFIT and their group, is a fantastic group. Rainier's, a very capable leader. They have a holding company, RSG, now with 14 different brands. Cyberobics is a digital delivery system around the McFIT brand. I think another great brand that's doing this is Equinox, how they're extending into hotels, travel luxury. They have both the low end and Blink model, the studio space in SoulCycle. So, and they're doing the SoulCycle, I think, in the last decade. It's probably the leading example of interface of digital physical experience. And by the way, they're the most profitable concept for a number of years. They might still be from a profitability perspective. So those are a few examples of brands that I think they see that future. They're pursuing that future. I think, on the other hand, what we see is brands that are tangential to the fitness space, like Lululemon Athletica, who is coming into the space. We see that with Gymshark, who just completed a £7-8 million pound investment in a gym themselves. So we're going to see these ancillary brands that aren't in our traditional brand come into our space as well. So like Lululemon Athletica in Chicago, they have, several studios. They're offering 6 to 10 fitness classes a day at $25 a pop. You can wear their apparel and use it at no cost during your class and give it back. They'll wash it, of course. And so these kind of hybrid combinations of different pillars of lifestyle that have to do with well-being, things like mindfulness, things like nutrition, things like medical. All these things, I think, are going to coalesce and combine in new models that will be creating new experiences as well. So I think within our space, the Equinox, Rainier's group out of Europe, and there are others, are great examples of in industry spaces that are reaching out. Equinox and hotels, et cetera, are doing this. And then, as I said, there are people outside of our space coming in, creating whole new blue ocean experiences.
Mm. And as a consumer, with all this choice, do you think there's going to be overwhelm for people? I mean, what do you do? Where do you start? How do you think people will work that out for themselves? Do you think it'll be a matter of jumping from the next newest thing?
I think it's a great question. So there's a lot to that, right? I think there's a current supply of competitors, Ali, that are going to lose their market share. They're going to not be successful. I think there are some that are part of the current kind of ecosystem of delivery that are probably overbuilt. I think there are a number of locations. Well, Manhattan's a great example. I mean, how many boutique studio concepts can you have on a corner, right? I think in many markets there's an overbuilding that's gone on. But I think that in the end, the choice is going to be how can you create a business model that's distinguished enough to meet the needs of clients in a unique way. And then along with that, there are all the delivery aspects of that. So, Some of these won't be pure brand plays. Some of them will be platform plays. So when you look at SoftBank's investment in Gympass, for example, which is sort of like an Amazon platform for product or service, which coalesces distribution like ClassPass of various products to one consumer where they can switch and choose and meld them up. So I think, yes, there's going to be a just explosion of consumer choice. And I think some markets will be overbuilt and they will fail. I think some existing delivery systems will fail. And I think that in the next 10 to 20 years, there are going to be some concepts that are going to come along that no one can imagine today.
Yeah, I've actually heard you say that the greatest products of the next 20 years haven't even been created yet.
That's correct. I believe that's true. Yes.
So does that mean that they're not even on the verge of creating those? They have actually not even conceptualized those yet?
Well, I think in certain cases you might see evidence of them, but, it would be sort of like opining about voice being the next key trend interface for consumer and the implications of that, and talking to industry people today. And when I mentioned that, I think 4 or 5 years ago in Europe during an event, people laughed at me. So I think there's some stuff around there that in retrospect, you could say, oh, that makes sense in retrospect. But today it would be hard to fathom what's going to work or what's not going to work, just because you don't really know. But I would think that if you put together key trends, I think whatever those things are, those models will be combinations of mindfulness, exercise, nutrition, entertainment, fashion apparel, and medical. And I think that those, as well as, there's other components and subcomponents of those, but I think you're going to see those things kind of coalesce and recombine in just a bunch of different ways with digital and physical, delivery attributes around all that, delivering these things that we would not have anticipated. Again, what I would do is go back to a concept like restoration hardware. If you look at their model and what they've become, they've reinvented what the furniture industry is. People wouldn't even necessarily consider them being in the furniture industry. When you think of Equinox going into the luxury hotel business, I think if you told anybody that was going to happen, even 6 years ago, people would have looked at you like you were crazy. So there's just so many possibilities. It's hard to know which ones will really break through.
It's interesting. And so I guess I've got a couple of questions around technology for you, but I've heard you refer to Kevin Kelly's views on technology before, and can you share with us maybe his take and your thoughts?
Yeah, Kevin's a prolific writer and thought leader. I would recommend anybody that can get a hold of his TED Talks, and he's just a fascinating book. One of the ones I refer to quite a bit is the one called The Inevitable, which came out a couple of years back, I believe, Ali. And it's just fascinating. His talk, which is what technology wants, I would recommend people look at that. He talks about key trends quite a bit. In The Inevitable, as I said, he points to 12 of them. So, and they're common themes that most people looking at tech would consider. Things like data, transparency around data, screens, everything becoming screens, cognition of everything, which is built-in intelligence, cyber-physical systems, which is the fourth industrial revolution, which basically means now we have cloud infrastructure and the internet that enables people to deliver systems, services, and products on a frictionless basis at very little cost. So I could go on and on. The great thing about Kevin is he waxes philosophical about the implications of all these things. And I really recommend the listeners look into his Recommendo newsletter, which I get every Sunday morning. It's kind of an interesting, pseudo-quirky, products-focused brief newsletter email. It's fantastic. But I think that one of the concepts, Ali, that he gets into, which is sort of the transhumanism type movement, has to do with the idea that technology is really biology, and it's part of a continuum of evolution. And similarly with other philosophers who are technologists, because he's really more of a philosopher, I think there are some profound things that his thinking should lead us to, pause upon when it comes to the idea, especially with health and fitness, of a utopian or dystopian future. And some of the responsibility as a society we're going to have to start taking for the implications of technology's adoption, because it's very good in many respects, and there's also unintended consequences that come from it that I think are going to become a bigger part of the discourse in the years ahead as AI becomes a real thing, as data and privacy become a bigger thing, and as the implications of these things and smart devices impede on our health or help our health. So I don't know if that's responsive enough to your question.
Yeah, no, it is. And it's a very interesting point that you make there. And I guess that leads to really my underlying question. And I know you're an advocate for technology, of course. But at the end of the day, do you think all of this technology and, I know you need to break it down a bit further, but in general, with this advancement in technology in the fitness industry, is it actually helping people get fitter?
Yeah, that's a great question. So what Kevin would tell you is that all the technologies of yesterday that solved the problems before them create another set of unforeseen problems that the technologies in the future will address. So while certainly technology has given us the opportunity to do a lot of things better, there has been, implications and negative impact, as many studies have shown, to our mental health, to our lack of activity, to our sense of isolation versus connection. So that's what I was referring to before, where, we're going to have to start making some more thoughtful choices as to the implications of some of these things. Because in the end, it's about, human beings and what, humans, what's valuable about humans, our sense of ethics, our empathy, these kind of things, our caring, true caring. And I think that we're coming to a time where both through government regulation and policy that's been a little behind the times with respect to the implications of these things, but also in how we design our business models to not to leverage technology as appropriately as possible, so that our human aspects and what's so good about it can be amplified, and other things can be made more efficient. But not having that efficiency crowd out things or take advantage of people from a standpoint of data, privacy, other things in a way that is not good. So I think this is going to be a big part of a discourse for humanity in the next decade or so. And I wrote a recent article post on the death of Facebook and Google and what the implications are of these technologies, both good and bad, not just from a human perspective, but also from a business perspective. And there's a lot of this stuff that I think people are somewhat aware of, but not nearly aware enough. And it's going to come down to all of us kind of joining hands and realizing that we cannot be victims of tech. We have to understand what its benefits are, but also be cautious and do something about its consequences that are adverse.
You mentioned privacy a few times now, and I heard recently a specialist, actually an ex-hacker in the area of privacy, and he's like, don't even bother worrying about privacy. If you're going to worry about that, you should have started about 10 years ago because it's too late.
That's right. And Kevin talks about that. Many people do. When you say privacy as a term, it brings up a lot of implications. Some of those things are not bad. Some of them are. Some of them, enable us to create great experiences, which is fantastic. And other applications of the use of data by third parties in ways that are nefarious are also a real threat. And we have to be careful about that, so that people aren't having consequences even to their health occur, or to their providing them care or other things that really shouldn't be part of the equation. And that's why you have to have checks and balances. And really, our current systems of government, for the most part, in the free world, they don't contemplate these things. And many of our leaders in governments and bureaucracies, they're really well behind the times. And this has implications to fitness. It has implications to fitness companies and how they're advertising, how they're interfacing with members, how they're delivering fitness services and products. And right now, a great example is how Amazon or even Google has the benefit of untold amounts of data, and what they might do with that to compete against bricks and mortar, without even the bricks and mortar competitors realizing it. So these are things that people really need to pay attention to, because there's so much of a benefit in using technology tools, but there's also a cost, and we need to be aware of that and conscious of it, and be mindful of what we really are looking to achieve in the end.
Mm. Yeah, and you mentioned at the start as well that it's all about how you use the technology. So it could have all the bells and whistles, but at the end of the day, is it practical for daily use, and is it actually going to help implement what you're trying to do? And I guess that brings me to the question about wearables, because I feel like wearables are a huge part of people's fitness these days. And I'd love to talk to you more about, where you think they might be going, and are they detrimental or are they actually helpful? And I guess my thoughts on that were that, for example, the Oura Ring for me has been really helpful, because up until then I had no way of tracking my sleep, and now I do. And so that's something that, if you can't measure it, you can't fix it sort of mentality. Whereas I also see people using things like power meters and Strava and different things to compete with other people, or to just, it's all about the numbers, and they're ignoring how they feel, and therefore maybe pushing themselves too hard. So what's happening with wearables? Where's that all going? And are they just going to end up being under our skin so we don't even need to put them on?
Yeah, right. That's exactly right. So wearables is kind of a misnomer name, kind of like social media is a misnomer name. It's a term people use. I think that, and I think it kind of limits one's view as to what it really represents in the beginning days of what is really a larger trend. And that is simply data collection from sensors, and then using that data collection with enterprise software in the cloud to create value. And then around that is the interface, right? So the interface right now with wearables is simply data collection, very simple data collection. We're moving into voice next, and more powerful data collection. So to your point, the ability to collect data without really even realizing you have a device on becomes a very, a bigger and bigger potential. And what you're going to see is Apple's new EarPods and other products, when it comes to headphones, will have heart rate and other sensor capabilities built in those devices, so that you're not even aware that you're actually having it tracked. So there's that, right? And as you described, how am I doing in my sleep, or how am I competing? I have my Myzone belt right here. I'll be working out with a little later, and they serve functions. Right now, it's gamification, to help you. But really, we're in the dinosaur age when it comes to where this is truly going, which is really larger amounts of data collected about you across multiple points, multiple sensor devices, and coalescing those into an experience platform that not only just provides you data, but ultimately personalizes coaching that is based on a psychological profiling that actually deals with your motivation, behavior, and other habits. And this is really the future, I think, of where we're going here. And there's many different implications to it when it comes to what experience you're looking for, what you're trying to achieve. So I think that really when you talk about wearables, it's kind of like I think it's akin to looking at the Wright brothers at Kitty Hawk with their little plane, and then getting on a 747 going across from New York to your home country of Australia, right?
Yeah. Well, you can't quite go from New York to Australia in one go yet, but you can go. The longest flight in the world, I believe, is New York to Singapore.
There you go. So that would be akin to that. So, and the idea being, look, you needed to have that plane to start at Kitty Hawk, right? There's the concept of the airplane, the concept of getting in the air and flying around. But there's a big leap to getting in a plane and flying halfway around the world in comfort, And I think that that is comparable, I think, to what you're seeing in what people term wearables now and what the ultimate experiences will be, because they're just going to be so much more profound. When I can walk around in my house and ask Alexa to turn on the living room lights, which I do, to order our dog's greenies for her treat, or to get the latest olive oil or shopping list, I don't have to do anything, and she's on 24/7. Those are the kind of frictionless experiences that when you combine a lot of data collection and also knowledge about me, what I'm trying to do, where I'm going, and then you have a persona that's digital that sounds just like a human coaching you on anything and everything that you need to know in a way that's most suitable to you and personalized to you. That's going to be a real thing, and it's not that far away.
And how far away is it?
I think you're already seeing it. That platform is a voice integration platform. I mean, who knows, right? I think within a decade for sure.
Interesting. So I know you can't predict, the next 20 years, and it's your analogy there of the plane, it really demonstrates it's just even unforeseeable for us to even see where this is going. So on that note, obviously your company invests in technology and fitness and those sorts of companies. Where do you see those types of companies going? Obviously, Apple is just going to go with the times and be successful. But what about the smaller players that are bringing out, say, these wearables, which are high tech for today's world, but in 2 years' time may not be needed because something better comes along? Where do you see, as an expert in this industry as well, and helping businesses, where do you see companies like that?
So I think our philosophy is very counter to the current narrative. And when you look in the United States in particular at innovation and technology over the last decade, the amount of innovation happening from small companies has diminished quite a bit. There's too much monopoly power in the key platform players. I'm not a fan of investing in microsensor or quote unquote wearable products today because they're going to become commoditized. I think the things that will become more valuable over time is the ability to integrate data in a way that creates a really cool and useful user experiences, combining different techs in delivery systems. So, we're not big fans of those types of investments now. We're far more, we think there will be a lot of innovation in hardware, but we think that margins in those kind of sensor items will be, diminishing over time as they move to commodity, and really the ability to, create platforms that deliver cool business cases and services will be where that value is. The other thing we think is that there's a super overvaluation on tech in the market today. We see a significant correction coming. And our thesis is that that's going to be good for the marketplace because it's going to cull a lot of funds out of things that aren't really going to work for the next wave of what will. And the good news is that, as always, technology continues to develop and emerge. Things like edge computing, which is really going to really drive the whole Internet of Things dynamic. The continued development of true AI platforms that are demonstrated to be able to do things very specifically. There's a lot of work that's still necessary to deliver all that stuff at scale. So, we're very bullish in the long run, but like anything, I think you may recall. I know you're probably too young to recall this. In the 2000.com, boom to bust. When I was around, a lot of people in the late 90s were talking about, all these internet companies. And then when they all went out of business and the markets corrected, people were laughing about the internet was over. Well, they didn't understand that it was just beginning. So I think we're going to see a similar trend in the next decade. But in the long run, I think it's going to be a phenomenal and emerging and gigantic marketplace. And I think there are some other things going on that are going to feed it still further, that are macro trends that, sustainability, climate change, pollution, and all these things that will all ultimately coalesce around well-being and people's choices and their lifestyles, and deliver just a modicum of experienced brands and products in our space that, as I'd said before, you would have never guessed would occur.
Yeah, that's interesting. And Bryan, I wish I couldn't remember that, but unfortunately, you obviously haven't seen my grey hairs to know how old I am. Interesting that you say that, though, because it does appear to be that way. But I can't help but think that personalized, real people interacting with real people is always going to hold its place. And okay. For me, the more that I see in technology, the more that comes out, the more I guess I see, especially the younger generation, using ClassPass and GymPass and going from one thing to the next, to having no real program or no real strategy to their fitness and health. The more I'm inclined to go back to this real human connection that really seems to work. Not to say that obviously all of these, technology doesn't have its place. It's just about how you use it. So very, very interesting. And I'd love to ask you, how do you actually use, wearables in your fitness and health, or not only wearables, but any sorts of technology, or do you keep it quite basic?
No, so I use anything that's new. I try it, everything and anything. Right now, I have the latest Apple Watch on my wrist. I have my Myzone belt, but I've used Garmin. I've used Strava. I've used pretty much every major product. And I'd like to go back to your point, if you don't mind, about what you just said about the communal and the face-to-face component. I agree with you. There's going to be a place for that. I think that absolutely is the case. And I think that we need to keep in mind, and I think you do, that, up until, the mid 90s, even into the early 2000s, people hear music now. Literally, I can listen to any kind of style of music at a flip of a switch that would have been completely impossible for me to have experienced, 30 years ago, without a lot of hassle.
And
right?
To be honest, I sort of wish that was the case sometimes, because you obviously don't live with a 6-year-old daughter who asks to listen to Jojo Biwa or someone like that, which, trust me, the things that I'm subjected to, I sort of wish that didn't exist.
Yes, and as a result of that, that's why, like, attending live performances around certain artists that people would have never been exposed to becomes, a potential and a possibility that reinvents the marketplace for that type of music. And I think we'll see similar things. I think digital will be a gateway drug for some people to go attend classes or experiences and become deeply immersed in that might not have ever happened. Similarly, you have to look at it, I think, as well from a business model perspective. So what's going on in the restaurant industry right now are these ghost restaurants. And so if you look at the restaurant industry, used to be that you had to have a front of the house service staff to take care of people coming into your restaurant. Well, now with delivery, you can launch a high-end brand without any entranceway or front door and make the best frickin' burritos in the world and launch those digitally through delivery platforms overnight. And if it doesn't work, you can change that to a cool Korean or a whatever you want to. So what this does is it creates these new possibilities from a business model perspective around experiences that would have been impossible, but certainly they're not going to take away from full service places. They're just going to be another whole dynamic and dimension of that industry. So I think we're going to see similar things in our space, and a combination of human and digital experiences in ways we never thought about.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And given that you are sort of like a guinea pig for fitness technology, I'm not sure whether you're sponsored, and I'm assuming you're not sponsored by anyone. You just test everything out. Are you able to share with us what your favorite things are and why?
That's a great question. I'm not, I'm really bad at that because I'm more of I don't fall in love with anything in that sense. I mean, I've not been really awed by anything yet. I mean, per se. I mean,
I feel like your standards are quite high.
I don't know about that, but what's really cool is when I can say, "Hey Alexa, tell me my schedule today." Or Alexa has an interface with some of my tech around, what I do, where I can talk to it and it can tell me things. But pretty much, and I think more voice interface will emerge around that. But pretty much right now, it's largely my Myzone thing, which I enjoy because it shares it with friends around the world when I work out, and I enjoy that kind of back and forth. I like that. I get my MEPs in every week, and I think I do on average about 2,800 to 3,000 MEPs a month. Not great, but not too bad. And then I get to see everyone else that I'm associated with and comment. So I enjoy that.
Yeah, we had the CEO of Myzone on the show as well.
Yep.
So
I saw that.
Yeah.
And so I enjoy that a lot. And I like my Apple Watch. I like its features and functionality. I'm looking forward to seeing their release in 5 days, because I think there's going to be sleep tracking and other things built in, which will be great. So I like that experience. But really now my latest thing, Ali, has been this whole voice interface thing. I think it's pretty cool.
So for people that want to check that out, where would we go to find out more about the voice thing and where that's going?
So I printed a number of articles on voice. It's the next great interface. You can find it in my LinkedIn profiles. And, that's a good question. I mean, obviously, if you Google it, you're going to find a lot on it. But I've written about it a number of times. So in my LinkedIn articles, or you can just Google my name and voice interface, and it's going to pop up. So,
or even better, go duck it, so then you don't get followed by Google.
Yes, brilliant suggestion considering the privacy issues we just talked about.
So, in summary, Bryan, is there anything that you'd like to leave our audience with? Maybe a tip about technology and fitness, or we're all about bringing health into fitness. Anything at all that you'd like to share?
I just think be open-minded, but also be on your guard. I think you've seen what's happened recently with the DNA testing services and access to data and privacy, for example. So I think, be open, but also be aware and be on guard. I think that's just a general thing that I would be, I caution anyone to be wide-eyed about. So I would say that.
And like we discussed, it's too late. If someone wants to track you, they can. If you're on any of these platforms.
In Europe now, you can stop it, and I think you're going to see in California, you're seeing legislation now for that. I think that you're going to see a backtrack. I would encourage people to be active in their exercising their political right to vote and be very aware of the various candidates and what their views are on some of these things, because we're going to need, in the United States at least, to be on guard around antitrust and other protections that are there for a reason. So, I would encourage people to be mindful of legislation and other things coming up around that. And then last thing is, Ali, great podcast. I mean, I was watching all about it in the last 24 hours, so I'll be a regular listener. And it's just awesome to have great people spreading information out, because the good news about tech is today there are a lot of credible, well-meaning people trying to help each other figure it out. And so people like you doing that are fantastic examples of what's good about tech in the world today and how much we can get for free that is so helpful and valuable.
Yeah, excellent. And Bryan, just before I let you go, I've got to ask you a bit of a personal question.
Sure.
Do you have a tattoo?
No, I do not. Should I?
Well, I thought you might even have like some sort of digital tattoo that can be, I don't know, taken away or whatever else. But it's just a question I ask all our guests on the show. And I just wanted to know if you had a tattoo or whether you'd thought about it.
I haven't, but I do have a hardwired connection into my cerebral cortex, kind of like the guy Neo in the Matrix.
Oh wow! Is that just is that just for extra power or?
It's for me to digitally download or upload whenever I need to.
Exactly. Well, I know you're joking, but in a couple of years' time, that won't be that funny. That'll just be reality. Excellent. Look, Bryan, thank you again for coming on, and I look forward to sharing this with everyone.
I really appreciate it. I'll be sure to share it around, and thanks to you and your listeners for the opportunity to give a few viewpoints. Hopefully it was refreshing or helpful.
Absolutely. For all the resources and show notes from today's episode, please go to www.ally.fitness. If you liked today's episode, please show your appreciation by going to iTunes, give us a 5-star review and subscribe.